For decades, there hasn't been such anticipation in the Catholic Church. Not because a dogma is about to be proclaimed, not because a loudly heralded epical reform is imminent. But why did Rome make an ancient, rare gesture charged with historical gravity? The convocation of an extraordinary consistory with all the cardinals of the world. No creation of new purples, no celebration, no choreography, just an encounter. And it's precisely this sobriety that makes it disturbing. In the history of the Church, when Rome calls everyone, it never does so out of routine. It does so when it senses that something can no longer be sustained if handled piecemeal. It does so when tensions are no longer local but systemic. When a document isn't enough, a commission isn't enough, a thematic synod isn't enough. The extraordinary consistory is a sign that the center feels the need to reclaim direct dialogue, without filters, without intermediaries. In recent years, the Church has spoken out a great deal. Documents, letters, interviews, synodal processes, global consultations, but above all, it has spoken remotely. Remotely between Rome and the dioceses. Remotely between bishops and cardinals. Remotely between doctrine and practice. The consistory, on the other hand, is the opposite. It is physical presence, shared responsibility, and close encounter. It is the moment when everything can no longer be left to cautious formulas. The fact that this consistory was convened for the first few days of January, immediately after the close of the Jubilee, is not an organizational detail. It is a strong, symbolic signal. The Jubilee has been presented as a time of openness, mercy, and reconciliation. But in the history of the Church, and even before that, in biblical history, after the time of mercy comes the time of discernment. After the open door comes direction. After welcome comes decision. This consistory arises in a specific context, a church that has been experiencing internal tension for years, yet has never truly been resolved. Not a sudden crisis, but a slow, multi-layered fracture. On the one hand, a vision that insists on synodality, pastoral adaptation, and dialogue with the contemporary world. On the other hand, a growing demand for doctrinal clarity, liturgical stability, and visible continuity with tradition. For a long time, attempts were made to reconcile these two souls without addressing their conflict. Today, that conflict has become structural. Historically, extraordinary consistories have always marked moments of transition. John Paul II convened them when he felt the need to strengthen the unity of the College of Cardinals in an increasingly fragmented world. Benedict XVI used them as forums for clarification, convinced that the Church could not long exist in doctrinal ambiguity. In recent pontificates, however, this instrument has been progressively marginalized, replaced by lengthy and widespread processes. Its return today is not neutral. It signals that those processes are no longer sufficient. Information emerging in recent days confirms that the consistory will not be a purely formal affair. Sources clearly speak of central themes: church governance, collegiality, synodality, and liturgy. Not administrative matters, but ecclesiological issues. It's significant that, according to previews, there will be no appointment of new cardinals. This is not a celebratory consistory. It is a consultative consistory, almost defensive, in the noblest sense of the word, defending unity before it breaks. The topic of synodality is one of the most sensitive issues. In recent years, it has been presented as the standard form of ecclesial life. But this very centrality has raised profound questions. Is synodality a means or an end? Is it a method of listening or a new governance structure? And above all, what is its relationship with the magisterium? In many parts of the Catholic world, synodality has been interpreted very differently, resulting in divergent practices. The Consistory was also created to address this problem, the lack of a common framework. Alongside synodality, the liturgy remains a sensitive issue. Not because it's the only issue, but because it's what makes the rift visible. Restrictions, local concessions, and divergent interpretations have transformed the liturgy into a permanent field of tension. For a significant portion of the Catholic world, especially traditionalists, the management of the liturgy in recent years has not been perceived as a pastoral act, but as a signal of identity. What has been sacred for centuries can become tolerated, marginalized, even suspect. This has produced a profound malaise, which Rome can no longer ignore. Then there's the issue of governance. In recent years, many cardinals have expressed, more or less explicitly, their discomfort with a role perceived as increasingly symbolic. Important decisions were made in restricted circles. These orientations emerge without any real collegial discussion. The extraordinary consistory is seen by many as a response to this malaise, an attempt to mend the relationship between the Pope and the College of Cardinals as a real governing body, not just a consultative one on paper. It is in this context that the figure of Pope Leo XIV fits in. His decision to convene all the cardinals so early in his pontificate, and at such a symbolically charged moment, is interpreted by many observers as a sign of awareness. Awareness that the Church cannot afford to continue for long without a perceived shared direction. Awareness that the time for controlled ambiguity may have come to an end. Because the consistory doesn't simply photograph a crisis, it makes it visible, focuses it, brings it into the same space. It is the moment when the Church stops speaking in illusions and must decide whether to address its fractures or continue to manage them. The central issue is not synodality itself, nor the liturgy in isolation. The key is the model of church governance that has gradually emerged in recent years. A model that many describe as fluid, adaptive, and process-based. But others experience it as indecipherable. And when governance becomes indecipherable, communion weakens. Not because goodwill is lacking, but because a recognizable center is missing. In recent years, there has been much talk of decentralization, of valorizing local churches, of pastoral autonomy. All elements also present in the Catholic tradition. But the problem arises when decentralization isn't accompanied by clear boundaries. When different dioceses adopt opposing practices on fundamental issues, the question is no longer pastoral, but ecclesiological. Is the Church one, or is it a federation of local sensibilities? The extraordinary consistory was also created to address this question without explicitly formulating it. To formulate it openly would mean admitting that the rift exists. But everyone knows it exists. The bishops see it, the priests live it, the faithful perceive it. A church that speaks one language in Germany, another in Africa, yet another in Latin America, without a visible criterion of unity, risks becoming incomprehensible even to itself. This is where the role of the College of Cardinals comes in. Historically, cardinals are not merely electors of the Pope. They are his principal advisors, guardians of universal communion. In recent years, many of them have felt a progressive emptying of this role, not through formality, but through practice. Decisions made elsewhere, directions emerged without real discussion. The extraordinary consistory, therefore, represents an attempt to rebuild that relationship, but also a test. Is the Pope willing to truly listen or merely consult? The figure of Pope Leo XV fits squarely into this tension. His pontificate began after a period in which many issues remained unresolved. His decision to summon all the cardinals is interpreted by some as a sign of discontinuity, by others as an attempt to stabilize the existing situation. But in both cases, it's a choice that exposes it, because convening means taking the risk of dissent. It means accepting that what has remained hidden until now will emerge. One of the most sensitive issues will inevitably be the relationship between the magisterium and pastoral practice. In recent years, the distinction between doctrine and concrete application has become increasingly blurred. This has allowed for flexibility, but it has also generated confusion. In many situations, the faithful are no longer sure whether a pastoral decision represents an exception or a new direction. The consistory is called to clarify this issue, at least internally, and that clarity, in this case, will not be painless. The traditionalist world views this consistory as a potential watershed moment, not out of nostalgia, but for the sake of ecclesial survival. It's not just a matter of defending a liturgical form or a theological sensibility. The question is whether there is still a recognized space for continuity within the Church, and whether tradition is considered a living resource or a problem to be managed. In recent years, many traditionalists have felt tolerated rather than listened to. The consistory is the first time this perception could be directly addressed. But beware, even those who support a more adaptive church view this event with apprehension. A consistory that strengthens the role of the College of Cardinals and reaffirms clear limits could slow down processes that have been underway for some time. It could scale back overly exaggerated local interpretations. It could bring the issue of doctrinal unity back to the forefront. In this sense, the consistory is not just a moment of debate, but a potential point for rebalancing internal power. The history of the Church teaches us that moments of greatest clarity have always been preceded by intense tensions. The Council of Trent arose from a crisis that threatened to shatter ecclesial unity. The First Vatican Council addressed the issue of authority against a backdrop of fierce opposition. Even the Second Vatican Council, often remembered as the opening council, generated a period of conflict precisely because many questions remained unresolved. Today, the Church experiences a similar situation, but in a much faster, much more demanding, and much less willing to wait world. And this is where the crucial question emerges, one that the consistory cannot avoid. Does the Church want to be recognizable or simply relevant? Because they are two different things. Being relevant means adapting to the language of the times. Being recognizable means maintaining a form, even when it's uncomfortable. In recent years, a balance between these two dimensions has often been sought. But this balance, when not based on clear criteria, becomes unstable. A consistory won't solve everything. No consistory has ever done that. But it can point the way. It can indicate whether the Church intends to continue along the path of managing differences or whether it is ready to redefine what is essential. It can indicate whether the Pope intends to strengthen the role of cardinals as a real body of discernment or maintain their predominantly symbolic function. Ultimately, what makes this consistory the most anticipated event in decades is not the possibility of a spectacular turn of events, but the risk of a choice. Because choosing means losing something. Losing consensus, losing comfort, losing ambiguity. But the history of the Church shows that every time it has chosen clearly, it has endured severe crises and emerged more recognizable. Rome holds its breath because it knows it's not about managing what already exists, but about setting a course. And when a course is set, not everyone will follow it. But without a course, no one will know where they're going. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.